Hi everybody, Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, and this week's contract tip has to do with appraisals. We are in the first week in March and spring has hit early, so we are already seeing a business absolutely picking up. There are tons of buyers on the market, lots of listings for sale, and business is booming right now. So having to do with appraisals, you have to keep that in mind, that business is getting busier, appraisers are getting busier, and lenders are getting busier. So the question is, what kind of time frame do you put in your contract for an appraisal contingency? Definitely the first thing to do is absolutely check with the lender and get an idea from the lender on what type of turnaround time they are asking, they're getting their appraisals in. Second thing is keep in mind that it's busy and the market is getting busier and busier. So appraisers are busy going out doing other appraisals. The third item to think about is that many lenders aren't even ordering the appraisal until after the due diligence time frame has ended. So if you have a 10-12 day due diligence time frame, then the appraisal isn't even ordered by many lenders until that time frame. So bottom line, you want to put minimum 20 days, probably 20 to 21 days at least, starting now through the middle of spring for your appraisal contingency. So, again, you're thinking, well, gosh, I represent the seller. I want a shorter time frame. I represent the buyer. I want a longer time frame. Even if you represent the seller, if the appraisal is not performed and a buyer is going to terminate, or if the appraisal comes in low and it's after the time frame, and the buyer's going to have to terminate. Basically, bottom line is, guess what? The seller wants to sell and the buyer wants to buy. The seller does not necessarily just want earnest money. The seller wants to sell the house. So if you get a contract in, if you're a listing agent, you get a contract in and it has an appraisal contingency time frame of something very short and relatively unrealistic in this time that we're in right now. For example, something like 10 days. Especially if obviously there's going to be a loan. Now, sometimes there are some cash buyers that are having it appraised too. That's a whole different issue. But if there's a lender and you have 10 days, that's really not realistic. And again, the ultimate goal for all the parties, the buyer, the seller, buyer's agent, and the listing agent, is absolutely to get the home sold. Now, if the appraisal comes in low, there are steps that the agents and the buyer and the seller can take to address that issue. But one quick tip about appraisals also, depending upon under which contract the parties are binding. If you're binding under the GAR contract and an appraisal comes in low, the buyer always has the option of paying cash for the difference between what the appraised value is and what the contract price is. But if the buyer doesn't want to do that, GAR contract, low appraisal, the buyer must present the seller with the opportunity to sell it at the lower appraised value. So the buyer must initiate an amendment along with a copy of the appraisal to the seller to give the seller the option of selling it at the appraised price. If the seller says no, at that point the buyer can terminate and under no penalty. If the buyer says yes, if the seller says yes, the buyer is obligated to close on the property. If you are binding under the RE forms contract package, appraisal comes in low, the buyer has the option of terminating immediately. The buyer may send the seller an amendment and give the seller the opportunity to sell it at the lower price. But the buyer, binding under the RE forms, the buyer does have the option with the low appraisal of terminating immediately. Thank you so much for watching. Again, Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education.